Can you be mine for one night? She grabbed my tie right there in the middle of the office, yanked me close until I could see the desperation in her eyes, and whispered it straight into my face. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because Sophia Bennett, the most untouchable woman in that entire building, had never once in 3 years looked at anyone the way she was looking at me right now. Like I was the only person who could save her. My answer destroyed everything we had carefully built between us. And somehow, it was the most honest thing I had ever said in my life. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if nobody told you today, hit that subscribe button. This story was made for people like you. The question that came out of nowhere. I want to start with the truth, because this story deserves it. I am not a man who loses his composure easily. 32 years old. Senior project manager at a mid-sized tech firm in Austin, Texas. I had survived brutal product launches, 18-hour deadline crunches, and one particularly catastrophic board presentation where the projector died mid-slide, and I had to recite quarterly projections from memory in front of 40 people. I was steady, measured, professional. I prided myself on that. So when Sophia Bennett appeared beside my desk at 6:47 on a Friday evening when the office was nearly empty and the cleaning crew was already running vacuums 2 floors below us, and she whispered those words to me, I genuinely believed for about 3 full seconds that I had misheard her. Daniel. Her voice was lower than usual. Careful. Can you be mine for one night? I looked up from my laptop screen. She was standing close, closer than normal. Her arms were crossed over her chest, not the confident, relaxed posture she usually carried into every room. This was different, tight, protective, like she was holding herself together. Sorry, I said. I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend. She said it faster this time, like saying it faster made it smaller. Just for tonight, just for one dinner. I put my pen down. I want you to understand something about Sophia Bennett before I continue. Because the kind of person she was matters enormously to why this moment hit me the way it did. Sophia was not the kind of woman who asked for help. In almost 3 years of working alongside her, I had never once seen her struggle with something and reach out her hand first. She solved problems before other people realized they were problems. She walked into rooms like she already knew where she was going to sit. She was 27 years old. And she carried herself with the kind of quiet certainty that most people spend a lifetime trying to build. Everyone in that office noticed her. And I mean everyone. The new hires watched her during morning stand-ups, trying to figure out how she communicated so efficiently. The executives listened when she spoke, even when they pretended they had already thought of whatever she'd just said. Our boss, Marcus Chen, once told me privately that Sophia was the most naturally talented designer he'd hired in 15 years. She was brilliant. She was confident. She was, if I'm being completely honest with myself, completely honest the way you can only be when you're alone with your own thoughts at midnight, she was the most remarkable person I had worked alongside in my entire career, and she had just asked me to be her pretend boyfriend. Sophia. I said her name slowly. Talk to me. What's actually happening? She pulled the chair from the empty desk beside mine. Marcus was already gone for the weekend and sat down. She set her bag on the floor. She took one breath that was deliberately, visibly controlled. And then she told me. The real story behind the question. Her younger sister Claire was celebrating her engagement that night. Private dinner at a restaurant in South Congress. Family only, plus a handful of close friends. The kind of event where everyone arrived already knowing everyone else's business and the evening's real purpose. Underneath the congratulations and the champagne was to take inventory of everyone's life and report back. Claire was engaged. Claire was settled. Claire was according to the unspoken but universally understood accounting of Sophia's family doing it right. Sophia was not. My mother has been on me for 6 months, Sophia said. She wasn't looking at me directly. She was looking at a fixed point on the desk, the way people do when they're reciting something they've rehearsed internally 100 times. Every phone call, every Sunday dinner. When are you going to settle down? You work too much. You're going to wake up one day and realize you missed everything important. Okay, I said carefully. That sounds exhausting. It is. She finally looked at me. And it's fine. I can handle that. I've been handling it. But Ryan is going to be there tonight. I recognized the name. Ryan Caldwell. I'd never met him, but I knew the broad strokes. Sophia had dated him for almost 2 years. They had ended things. She ended things about 8 months before I was hired. By the time I arrived at the company, he was already history. But history has a way of staying in a room longer than people expect. Your ex, I said. My ex who my entire family adores. Her voice stayed flat and even. My ex who my mother refers to as the one who got away, as if I were the one who let something precious slip through my fingers. My ex who is attending my sister's engagement dinner tonight because he and Claire's fiancé played basketball together in college, and no one thought to mention this to me until my mother called this afternoon. I was quiet. If I walk in there alone, Sophia continued, it will not be a dinner, it will be a trial. Every person at that table will be watching me and Ryan and doing the math on what went wrong and whose fault it was. My mother will make eyes at him across the table. Claire will try to seat us next to each other because she still thinks we belong together. And I will spend 4 hours defending a decision I made 8 months ago that I have absolutely zero regrets about. So you want someone there with you, I said. A buffer. I want someone there who makes it clear that I am not the sad, lonely story they've decided to write about me. She said it quietly but without apology. I need someone beside me who looks like a choice I made, not a consolation, a real deliberate choice. I sat back in my chair. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I was processing, and I was also, if I'm being honest, trying very hard not to say the first thing that came into my head, which was, you could have asked anyone in this building, and you came to me. I asked the second thing instead. Why me? She didn't answer right away. The vacuums were still running somewhere below us. The office had that particular end-of-week quiet where the fluorescent lights felt dimmer, and the space felt looser, like the building itself was exhaling. Because I trust you, she finally said. Because you know me well enough to pull it off. And because... She paused. Because you're the one person I knew wouldn't make it weird. I almost laughed at that last part. Not because it was funny. Because it was the exact kind of thing she would say. Completely sincere, completely practical, and completely unaware of the particular irony it contained when delivered to a man who had spent nearly 3 years carefully not making it weird by keeping the truth about how he felt locked behind a wall of professional courtesy. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay. I'll do it. I stood up and closed my laptop. But we need rules. Setting the rules for a lie. We sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before driving anywhere. Her idea. She said she needed us to be on the same page before we walked into a room full of people who would be watching us carefully and who already knew both of our tells. First rule, she said. No complicated backstory. If someone asks how long we've been together, we keep it vague. A few months. Simple. Agreed, I said. The more specific the lie, the more places it can break. She looked at me. That was very quickly stated. I've managed projects under pressure for 8 years. I know how to identify failure points. She made a small sound that was almost a laugh. Fine. Second rule. No public affection that goes beyond what's believable for a couple who's still relatively new. Define believable. Hand-holding, sitting close, normal eye contact. She said it like she was reading from a list. Nothing that would make either of us uncomfortable. And if someone asks a question I don't know the answer to, redirect it to me, I'll handle it. Okay. I looked at her. My rule. She raised her eyebrows. Whatever happens tonight, I said, we talk about it afterward. All of it. Whatever gets complicated, whatever gets said, we deal with it before it becomes something we avoid. She considered that for a moment longer than I expected. Agreed, she said. Neither of us said anything about the rule we were both clearly aware of, but had wordlessly decided not to speak aloud. Don't let it become something real. I started the car. Walking into the room. The restaurant was on South Congress, one of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and menus, without prices on the cocktails. The kind of place that signals a certain kind of occasion without having to say it out loud. We walked in together. And I want to be precise here because the details matter. She didn't take my hand at the door. She didn't lean into me. She didn't perform anything. What she did was simpler and somehow more effective. She walked slightly closer to me than she normally would. Close enough that her arm brushed mine when we moved through the entrance. Close enough that when I put my hand at the small of her back, a natural, instinctive gesture that came from somewhere. I didn't examine too carefully. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like. Two people who knew each other's bodies and had stopped being conscious of it. Her family was already seated. I clocked the table in about 4 seconds. 10 people. Her mother at the end, a woman in her early 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the particular expression of someone who had already formed an opinion and was waiting to see if the facts would cooperate. Claire, the younger sister, genuinely beautiful in that luminous pre-wedding way, sitting beside a tall man who was presumably her fiancé. Aunts and uncles. 2 people around Claire's age, who were likely friends. And Ryan Caldwell. I spotted him immediately because he was the one watching us walk in. He was good-looking. I won't pretend otherwise because pretending would be petty, and I am trying to tell this story as honestly as I know how. Dark hair, broad shoulders, the confident ease of a man who was comfortable in most rooms. He was talking to someone when we entered, but he stopped mid-sentence when he saw Sophia. His expression did something complicated for a fraction of a second. Then he arranged it into something neutral and pleasant, the way people do when they've had practice. Sophia's mother was already on her feet. Sophie. She came around the table with her arms open, and I saw Sophia shift into a different version of herself, still herself, but warmer, more careful. She hugged her mother and then turned. Mom, this is Daniel Brooks. I extended my hand. Mrs. Bennett, it's wonderful to meet you. I've heard so much. She shook my hand, but looked at my face rather than my hand. She told you about us. She told me about her family, I said, which was completely true and carefully non-specific. She talks about her father's Sunday phone calls quite a bit. Something softened in her mother's expression. That's something. She gave Sophia a look, the kind that said we'll discuss this later, and then she pulled us both toward the table. The dinner begins. We were seated across from Ryan. I don't know if that was intentional or accidental, but I suspect it was intentional, and I suspect Sophia's mother was responsible for it. Ryan introduced himself with the easy warmth of someone who was confident in his position at a table. Ryan Caldwell, he said to me, extending his hand. Old friend of the family. Daniel Brooks, I said. Sophia's partner. I used the word deliberately. Not boyfriend. That word would have required clarification, opened a door to questions about how long and when and where. Partner carried weight. It implied history and mutual investment without the details. Ryan's handshake was firm and brief. What do you do, Daniel? He asked. Technology sector, project management. That's where you two met. Worked together for about 3 years, I said. It took me a while to convince her. I felt Sophia look at me quickly from the side. I kept my expression easy and relaxed. You had to convince her, her Aunt Patricia, or possibly Aunt Deborah. I hadn't sorted them out yet, asked with the delighted interest of someone who loved a good romantic story. She's not exactly someone who makes things easy, I said. She wanted to keep things professional, very professionally. I glanced at Sophia. Took a lot of patience. Sophia made the expression of a woman who was simultaneously suppressing laughter and preparing a retaliation. He is exaggerating, she said pleasantly. I'm understating, I said. The table laughed. Even her mother smiled. And for a moment, a genuine, unexpected moment, it didn't feel like a performance at all. The comment that changed the room. Dinner was served. Conversation moved, the way it does at family gatherings, fluidly, unpredictably, and occasionally, into territory that made you want to quietly excuse yourself. The topic of Sophia's career came up around the salad course. It always did. I had figured out simply from 3 years of listening to her talk about her family that her professional ambition was the subject that generated the most commentary. Her uncle, a man named Gerald, who sold insurance in Houston and had strong opinions about most things, made the first move. "Sophia, your mother tells us you're up for some kind of leadership role." He said it with that particular male inflection that turns a statement of fact into a gentle interrogation. "I'm being considered for a position, yes," Sophia said evenly. "Out of town." A brief pause. "Potentially." Gerald cut into his steak with the conviction of a man who had already made up his mind. "I always said you were ambitious, Sophie. Reminds me of your father's sister. Brilliant woman. Never settled down, though. Spent her whole career chasing the next thing." The table went quiet in the specific way tables go quiet when everyone is pretending not to listen while listening very intently. Ryan said nothing. He just turned his water glass in his fingers. Sophia opened her mouth. I spoke first. "I think that's actually one of the things I admire most about her," I said. Gerald looked at me. I held his gaze without apology. "Her ambition." I set my fork down. "The way she commits completely to the work she believes in." I've watched her solve problems that stopped other people cold, not because she's lucky, but because she refuses to accept that something is impossible just because it's hard. That's not a flaw. I paused one beat. "It's a gift." The table was very quiet. Sophia was looking at me. Not with gratitude exactly. Something more complicated than that. Something that looked like she was recalibrating something she had previously decided. Her mother was looking at me, too. Ryan was looking at his water glass. "Well," Gerald said after a moment, "that's a very modern perspective." "Probably." I agreed pleasantly and picked up my fork again. Sophia didn't say anything to me directly, but under the table her hand found mine and she pressed once. Just once. And I understood. The moment I stopped being able to pretend, I was pretending. There is a specific identifiable moment in that dinner when I stopped being able to maintain the clean professional distance I had wrapped myself in for 3 years. I can pinpoint it exactly. It happened during a conversation between Sophia and her mother, quiet enough that the rest of the table wasn't hearing it, but I was sitting directly beside her, so I heard every word. Her mother leaned close and said low and insistent, "He seems like a good man, Sophie. Don't overthink it. Don't let work take everything again." And Sophia steady, composed, unflappable. Sophia went completely still for 1/2 second. Just one. Just long enough for me to see what was underneath all that composure. She was scared. Not of her mother's pressure. Not of Ryan sitting across the table. Not of any of the external things that had seemed like the whole story when she'd explained it in the parking garage. She was scared of herself. Of the choices she'd already made, and the ones still ahead. Of wanting something enormous from her career, and not being entirely certain she deserved to want it without paying a price she wasn't prepared to name. I watched her rebuild her composure in real time, layer by layer, in about 2 seconds flat. And when she turned back to the table conversation, she was Sophia again, perfectly assembled, completely in control. No one else noticed. I noticed. And something in my chest did something I had spent 3 years training it not to do. I had agreed to pretend to be her boyfriend. But I was sitting at that table watching her be brave in a way that most people would never recognize as bravery, and I was feeling things that had nothing to do with pretending. That was the moment. I knew it was the moment. I filed it away and told myself I would deal with it later, the same way I always dealt with things that were too large to look at directly. Later, I reminded myself. Later. Ryan dessert arrived. The champagne for Claire and Marcus's engagement toast was poured. Her future brother-in-law, Marcus, not to be confused with my boss. Different. Marcus entirely gave a warm, slightly rambling speech about Claire, and how he knew from the first time he saw her that she was someone worth the inconvenience of becoming a better person. The table laughed. Claire cried a little prettily. Her mother cried more. Ryan stood up to congratulate them with the ease of a man in his natural habitat, charming, generous, completely comfortable with being watched. And then he turned to Sophia, not to the table, specifically to Sophia. To old friends, he said, raising his glass slightly toward her. And new ones. His eyes moved very briefly to me. It was gracious. It was polished. It was the move of someone who understood exactly what he was doing. Sophia raised her glass without hesitation. To Claire and Marcus, she said, and redirected the entire moment back to her sister without missing a beat. That was Sophia. She never gave an inch she didn't choose to give. After the toast, when everyone was talking again, Ryan moved around the table, refilling glasses, speaking to relatives, and eventually reached us. "Good to see you, Sophia," he said. And he meant it. That was the complicated part. I could hear that he actually meant it. "You too, Ryan," she said. He looked at me. "She told you about me?" "Not much," I said honestly. "She doesn't spend a lot of time in the past." Something moved across his face. It wasn't hostility. It was something more like recognition. "No," he said. "She never did." He glanced at Sophia. That was always her strength. And mine. He paused. And mine. He moved on. Sophia exhaled beside me. Quiet enough that only I could hear it. "You okay?" I said just as quietly. She thought about it for a moment longer than someone is supposed to take to answer that question. "Yes," she said. And then, "No." And then, "I will be." "That's enough," I said. She looked at me. "Being in process is enough," I said. "You don't have to be fine yet. You just have to get through dinner." She was quiet for a moment. "You're surprisingly good at this," she said. I looked at her steadily. At what? At knowing what to say. I thought about 3 years. About black coffee on deadline days. About Sunday phone calls she took in the stairwell because the office was too loud. About the way she smiled when she was nervous, and the way she went very, very still when something genuinely frightened her. "I've had practice," I said. "Paying attention." She looked at me again, that same recalibrating look from earlier, and I made myself look away first. Because some things are not conversations you have at someone else's engagement dinner while pretending to be a couple. Some things you have to earn the right moment for. After dinner, the walk to the car. The dinner ended around 9:30. There were long goodbyes, hugs, kisses on cheeks, promises to call. Her mother hugged me, which I had not entirely anticipated, and said in my ear, "She seems happy. That matters more than anything else." I thanked her and meant it. Claire grabbed Sophia by both hands and pulled her close and said something in her ear that made Sophia laugh, a real laugh, not a polite one that came from somewhere unguarded. I watched that. She's not wrong, whoever she is, to love her sister. We walked to my car. The October air in Austin was doing that thing it does in fall, warm enough during the day, but with an edge to it after dark, the first real reminder that the season is changing. The city hummed around us, traffic on Congress, music drifting from somewhere nearby. Neither of us spoke for the first half block. Then Sophia said, "You didn't have to say what you said to my uncle." "I know. But you did anyway. It needed to be said." She was quiet for a few steps. "People don't usually do that. Push back on Gerald." "Why not?" "Because it's not their family. It's not their battle." I stopped walking. She stopped too and turned to look at me. "Sophia," I said, "everything you carry into that room you carry to work too. And I have watched you carry it for 3 years without asking anyone for help. Someone defending you to your uncle at a dinner party is the absolute least that should be happening." She looked at me for a long moment. "You're going to make this complicated," she said. "Not an accusation. Something more like a recognition." "I'm not trying to," I said, and I meant that. She turned and started walking again. I fell into step beside her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You don't have to thank me." "I know." A pause. "I'm doing it anyway." We reached the car. She put her hand on the door handle and then stopped. "Can I tell you something?" she said, not looking at me, facing the car. "Always," I said. She took a breath. "I'm glad it was you I asked." I didn't trust myself to respond to that with the simplicity it deserved, so I just said, "Get in the car. I'll take you home." She got in the car, and I stood on the driver's side for exactly 3 seconds before getting in, just to make sure my face was doing something reasonable before she could see it. 3 seconds. Barely enough. The drop. I parked outside her building on West 6th. The engine was still running. Neither of us had mentioned turning it off. "Well," she said. The word landed in the space between us with a kind of weight. "Well," I agreed. "We pulled it off." "We did." She looked out the windshield. "Ryan was—" She paused. "He was fine. He's always fine. That's the thing about Ryan. He's always fine, and everything always looks fine, and you could spend a very long time inside that fineness and only realize later that you were disappearing." I didn't push her on that. She said it the way you say things you've already made your peace with. She wasn't asking me to unpack it. "Your family is nice," I said instead. "They're a lot," she said. "They love you. That comes through." She smiled at the windshield. "Yeah, it does. Even when it's suffocating." A pause. "Daniel." "Yeah." She turned to look at me. Full eye contact. No performance. "Why did you actually agree to this?" And there it was. The question I had been carrying in my pocket all night, knowing it was there waiting for someone to pull it out. I had a perfectly acceptable answer prepared. Practical, friendly, clean. Because we're friends. Because you needed help. Because that's what people do. I almost said it. I could see the shape of the safe answer in my mouth ready to go. And then I thought about what she had said in the parking lot at the office. Because if I have to pretend with someone, I want it to be someone I trust. And I thought about 3 years of learning someone from a distance close enough to know everything and far enough to say nothing. And I said, because for one night I wanted to stop pretending that I didn't want something more. The car was very quiet. She was looking at me. I didn't take it back. I didn't soften it. I had said it, and it was real, and I was not going to unmake it. "Daniel," she started. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "Not tonight. Not right now. I'm not asking for anything. I looked at her. "You asked me why. That's why." She was still looking at me. The engine was still running. "I need to think," she said, very quietly. "I know. I know," I said again. She opened the car door, got out, turned back. For one moment she just stood there in the open door of the car, the October air coming in around her, the city behind her. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight." "Sophia," I said. "Yeah." I looked at her honestly. "Whatever you figure out, I'm not going anywhere." She held my gaze for a beat. Then she closed the door, and I watched her walk through the entrance of her building until the doors slid shut behind her. Then I sat in that parked car on West 6th Street in Austin, Texas, at 9:53 on a Friday night in October, with the engine still running and my hands still on the steering wheel. And I thought about how I had spent 3 years building a wall between who I was and what I felt. And how in one night over a dinner, I had no business attending in a room full of people I had never met, telling the truth to someone I thought I understood. I had walked straight through it. The question now wasn't whether the wall was down. The question was what Sophia Bennett was going to do now that she knew it. And I had absolutely no idea. But for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't pretending I didn't care about the answer. That was something. That was, I thought, pulling away from the curb and into the quiet Austin night. That was the beginning of something. Whether it was the beginning of something beautiful or the beginning of something I'd have to survive, I genuinely could not tell you. But it had started. And I was not for once in my careful, measured professional life trying to stop it. Drop your city in the comments right now. I'm watching where this story reaches, and I want to see your name there. If this hit you somewhere real, subscribe. Part 2 is coming, and what happens next is something I never saw coming. I did not sleep that night. I want to be precise about that. I am a man who sleeps. I have slept through alarm clocks, through thunderstorms, through the particular anxiety of launch week at work, when everything is on fire, and the only thing you can control is whether you're rested enough to face the next disaster. Sleep has always been the one thing I could count on to arrive when I needed it. Not that night. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, and replayed every single moment of that dinner with the obsessive precision of a man trying to find the exact point where he made an irreversible decision. I kept landing on the same place. The car. West 6th Street. The engine still running. For one night, I wanted to stop pretending I didn't want something more. I had said it out loud. To her face. In real time. With no ability to take it back. By 2 in the morning, I had decided it was fine. People said things. Things didn't have to mean what they sounded like they meant. Sophia was intelligent and pragmatic, and she would process it, and we would arrive at work on Monday, and things would be professional and fine. By 3 in the morning, I had decided it was not fine. By 4, I got up and made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table, and accepted the reality that I had told the truth to someone who had specifically asked me 6 hours earlier to spend an evening pretending. The irony was not lost on me. My phone was on the table. It stayed quiet. I watched it the way you watch something you're simultaneously hoping will move and hoping won't. At 4:47 in the morning, it lit up. One text. From Sophia. I stared at the notification for 10 full seconds before I opened it. It said, "Are you awake?" I typed back immediately. Yes. 3 seconds passed. Me too, she wrote. Can't stop thinking. I sat very still with my coffee cup in my hand and read that sentence 4 times. Can't stop thinking could mean 100 different things. It could mean she was processing what I'd said and building a polite, careful response that would let us both walk away intact. It could mean she was angry. It could mean she was confused. It could mean she was sitting in her own apartment doing exactly what I was doing, which was turning one sentence over and over in the dark until it either made sense or broke. I typed, "About what?" which was objectively the most useless question I could have asked because we both knew about what. But I needed to hear her say it. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, about what you said in the car. I put the coffee cup down, and I typed. A longer pause this time. Long enough that I stood up and walked to the window and stood there looking at the empty street below, because sitting still suddenly felt impossible. My phone buzzed. I think we need to talk. Not over text. I looked at that message and felt something shift inside my chest. Not dread exactly. Something more like the feeling you get standing at the edge of something high before you decide whether you're going to jump. Okay, I wrote back. When tomorrow morning, she wrote. Coffee. Our place. Our place. She meant the coffee shop on 5th and Bowie, the one we'd been going to for 2.5 years, when a conversation needed to happen away from the office. We'd solved 3 major project crises at that specific corner table. We'd debriefed after the quarterly review, where our VP had lost his mind over a timeline discrepancy. It was our place the same way that certain places become your place, without anyone deciding it through repetition, through trust, through the particular habit of going somewhere together when something mattered. 9 o'clock, I wrote. 9 o'clock, she confirmed. Then nothing. No good night. No see you tomorrow. Just the conversation ending the way it had to end, with both of us holding something too large to put into a text message and knowing that tomorrow was coming regardless. I went back to bed. I still didn't sleep. But at least now I knew where I was going in the morning. And sometimes that's the only anchor you need to make it through the dark. Saturday arrived the way October mornings in Austin. Dew cooler than you expect, with a sky that's doing its absolute best to be beautiful, whether you're in any condition to appreciate it or not. I was not particularly in any condition to appreciate it. I had managed maybe 90 minutes of sleep somewhere between 5 and 7, and I had spent the walk to the coffee shop cycling through every version of this conversation that I could anticipate. She was already there when I arrived. She was sitting at the corner table with her hands wrapped around a black coffee. No laptop, no notebook, nothing in front of her to give her something to do with her eyes. She was just sitting there, and when she saw me come through the door, she didn't look away. That told me something. Sophia looked away when she was about to say something she'd rehearsed. If she was holding eye contact, she was going to say whatever was actually true. I sat down across from her. I had gotten my own coffee at the counter. I set it on the table. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then she said, Last night was a lot. Yeah, I said. The dinner, my family, Ryan. She paused. You. Yeah, I said again, because I was apparently incapable of more sophisticated language at 9 in the morning on 2 hours of sleep. Daniel. She put her coffee cup down. What did you mean? What you said in the car. I need to know if you meant it the way I think you meant it, or if I'm constructing something that isn't there. This was the moment. I could feel the weight of it, the same way you feel a door before you open it. Understanding that the room on the other side is going to be different from the room you're standing in now, and there's no version of this where you get to know what it looks like before you walk through. How do you think you meant it? I asked. She looked at me steadily. Don't do that. Don't answer a question with a question. You've done that to me in meetings for 3 years, and it works every time, but I need a real answer right now. I respected that enough to give it to her. I meant it, I said. Exactly the way it sounds. I have felt something for you for a long time. I kept it professional because that was the right thing to do, and because I had no reason to believe it was anything other than one-sided. Last night you asked me why I agreed to go with you, and that was the real reason. I wanted one night of not pretending it wasn't there. She looked at me. She didn't fill the silence immediately, and I appreciated that because Sophia filling a silence too quickly would have meant she'd rehearsed the response, and a rehearsed response would have meant she'd already decided. The fact that she sat with it told me she was still figuring it out in real time. How long? She finally asked. How long have I felt it? Yes. I thought about being slightly vague. I thought about rounding the number down so it sounded less significant. I thought about a lot of things in the space of about 2 seconds. About 2.5 years, I said. Her expression did something. I couldn't fully read it. It wasn't shock, or if it was shock, she processed it too quickly for me to catch it on its way through. 2.5 years, she repeated. Give or take. And you said nothing. We worked together, I said. You were brilliant at your job, and I wasn't going to complicate that for either of us, based on something I wasn't sure was anything other than my own problem. It wasn't your problem, she said quietly. I looked at her. What does that mean? She picked up her coffee cup and then set it back down without drinking from it, which was something she did when she was running a thought before she was ready to let it out. I'd seen that move 300 times. It means, she said carefully, that it wasn't as one-sided as you thought. The coffee shop was doing its normal Saturday morning business around us. People talking, espresso machines running, a kid at a nearby table asking his mother a question about something normal, ordinary life happening in every direction. I was vaguely aware of all of it the way you're vaguely aware of background music present registered completely irrelevant. Say that again, I said. I'm not going to say it again, she said. You heard me. Sophia. Daniel. She looked at me directly. I am not a woman who says things she doesn't mean. I have never once in 3 years said something to you that I didn't mean. Give me the same credit. I sat back. My mind was doing something I can only describe as recalibrating every memory I had from the past 2.5 years with this new information folded in which produced a dizzying sequence of moments that now meant different things than they had meant 30 seconds ago. The way she looked at me when I defended her in a meeting. The way she always came to my desk first when she had a problem she needed to think through out loud. The Sunday morning 6 months ago when she'd called me for no apparent reason, and we'd talked for 2 hours about nothing that mattered. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked. For the same reasons you didn't. Her voice was even. I didn't know if it was real or if I was projecting. I didn't want to compromise what we had, and I was... She stopped. What? Scared, she said, like the word cost something. I was scared that if I said it, and it wasn't what I thought it was, I would lose the one person at that company who actually saw me clearly. I looked at her across the corner table at our place on 5th and Bowie at 9 in the morning on a Saturday in October, and I thought about 2.5 years of proximity and careful distance and all the things we had not said and apparently should have. That's a lot of wasted time, I said. Yes, she said. It is. We sat with that for a moment. Then she said, There's something else I need to tell you. And something in her voice shifted, just slightly. the particular register that meant she was about to say something she'd been carrying for a while. "Okay," I said. "The job my uncle mentioned at dinner last night, the leadership position." I nodded. "Out of town, you said?" "Seattle," she said. "It's a 6-month contract with a startup that's building out their entire design infrastructure. It's the kind of role that comes along once in a career, the kind of thing I have been working toward for 6 years. She paused. "I've been offered it." I didn't say anything immediately. "They offered it 2 weeks ago," she said. "I've been thinking about it since then. I hadn't told people because I hadn't decided yet. And because—" She stopped again. "Because what?" She looked at me with an expression I had never quite seen on her face before. Something raw in it. Something she wasn't trying to manage. "Because your reaction mattered to me. More than I wanted it to. And I didn't know how to handle that, so I just didn't say it." I put my coffee down. I want to describe honestly what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters to the story. What I felt was not the clean, simple thing I would have preferred to feel. What I felt was complicated. 3 separate reactions happening simultaneously, which is uncomfortable and inconvenient, and also just what happens when the truth is complicated. The first thing I felt was pride. Genuine, uncomplicated pride, the kind you feel for someone you've watched work hard and earn something real. Seattle. A leadership role. Infrastructure design for a startup. That was exactly the level she deserved to be operating at, and the fact that someone had seen it clearly enough to make the offer told me they were paying attention. The second thing I felt was a cold, quiet fear that arrived without any drama and just sat down in the middle of my chest like it belonged there. 6 months. Seattle. Different city. Different time zone. Different life. We had spent 2.5 years learning each other from 15 feet apart. I had just told her in a parked car at 10 o'clock at night that I had feelings for her. And she had just told me over morning coffee that she might be leaving in what weeks a month. The third thing I felt, and this is the one that surprised me, was clarity. Because in the space of about 4 seconds while she was watching me process it, I understood something about myself that I had never had to examine directly before. I understood what kind of man I was going to be about this. "You should take it," I said. She blinked. "Daniel." "No, listen to me." I leaned forward. "You just told me this is the role you've been building toward for 6 years. You just told me it's a once-in-a-career opportunity. The only question on the table is whether you're going to say yes. And the answer is yes." "It's not that simple," she said. "It is that simple," I said. "Everything else is what I said last night, all of it, that's a separate conversation. Your career is not a variable in that conversation. Your career is your career." She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't entirely decode. "You just told me you've had feelings for me for 2.5 years, she said. "And your response to finding out I might be moving to Seattle for 6 months is to tell me to go." "Yes," I said. "Why?" I looked at her steadily. "Because if the first thing I do when you tell me about the best opportunity of your professional life is make it about what I want, then I don't deserve to be someone you trust. And I would very much like to keep being someone you trust." The coffee shop hummed around us. Sophia sat very still across from me. Then she said very quietly, "You are making this extremely difficult." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing." "I'm sorry." I caught myself. "Right." She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. "Here's what's true," she said after a moment. "I have not decided yet. I have been going back and forth for 2 weeks, and last night did not make it simpler." She looked at me. "But I need you to understand something. The reason your opinion mattered enough to scare me, the reason I didn't tell you it wasn't just about the job. It was because somewhere in the last 2.5 years, you became the person whose judgment I trusted most. And that is not a small thing to me." I held her gaze. "I know." "Do you?" "Yes," I said. "And for what it's worth, whatever you decide, I'll still be that person. That part doesn't have a condition on it." She picked up her coffee, drank, put it down. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay meaning I believe you." She looked at me. "And okay meaning I need a few days. This is a lot to hold at once." Take whatever you need, I said. You're being very reasonable, she said. I'm trying. It's slightly irritating. I'll work on that, I said. And then something broke in both of us at the same time, and we both laughed. Real laughter, not polite laughter. The kind that comes out when the tension has been so high for so long that the release of it needs somewhere to go. We laughed at nothing and everything, at the absurdity of the previous 18 hours, at the fact that we were sitting in our regular coffee shop on a Saturday morning after a fake dinner date that had become the most honest conversation either of us had apparently had in years. When it settled, the air between us was different. Lighter, but more serious simultaneously. Like something had been cleaned out to make room for something real. She was looking at me in the new way she'd been looking at me since the car last night. Not like a coworker, not quite like a friend, like a woman who is deciding something about a man she's known for a long time and is only now seeing clearly. Monday, she said. Work is still work. Absolutely, I said. Nothing changes at the office until... She paused. Until we know what we're doing. Agreed, I said. I need the weekend to think. Take it. She stood up and gathered her bag, and I stood up too, because that is what you do, and we were standing on the same side of the corner table, now closer than the table arrangement required, and neither of us moved to correct it. Daniel, she said. Yeah, thank you, for last night, for this morning, for being... She seemed to search for the word. For being you. That was very barely a compliment, I said. It was an enormous compliment, she said. You just don't know how to take one. She left the coffee shop. I sat back down at the corner table and finished my coffee and stared out the window and thought about a woman I'd known for nearly 3 years, whom I had apparently not known at all, because 2.5 years of careful professional distance had hidden from me the single most important piece of information, that it was not one-sided. It was never one-sided. Monday came. True to her word, she was exactly who she always was at the office. We had our regular 9:15 project sync. She pushed back on a timeline I'd built for the Q4 rollout, and she was right. The timeline had a problem, and we fixed it, and it was professional and efficient and completely normal. The only difference was that twice during the meeting, she looked at me with that new way she'd been looking at me since Friday night. And both times I held her gaze for exactly 1 beat longer than professionally necessary. And both times she looked away first and went back to the work, which was its own kind of language. On Tuesday afternoon, she stopped by my desk at the end of the day when the office was thinning out. She sat on the edge of the empty chair beside me, the same chair she'd sat in Friday evening before everything changed. I made a decision, she said. I closed my laptop. About Seattle. Yes. I waited. She looked at me with the steadiness that was her defining feature, the thing that made her remarkable in every room she walked into. I'm going to take it, she said. I nodded. 6 months, she said. January through June. That's the right call, I said. I'm scared, she said. And coming from Sophia, that sentence had the weight of something enormous being set down carefully. I know. I'm not scared of Seattle, she said. I'm scared of... She stopped. Of what happens here, while I'm there. I looked at her directly. You want to know if what I said Friday night has an expiration date? She held my gaze. Does it? I thought about the honest answer. The real one, not the one designed to reassure her because she didn't need reassurance, she needed truth. No, I said. It doesn't. She studied my face for a long moment, with the attention of someone who has learned to read people accurately and needs to be sure they're reading this particular person correctly. Whatever she saw, it seemed to satisfy her. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. She stood up from the chair. We have January, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of something she was choosing right there in that moment. We have January, I confirmed. She picked up her bag. Don't make me regret this, Brooks. I've never given you reason to, I said. No, she said with the ghost of a smile. You haven't. She walked toward the elevator. I watched her go, and felt something that I had spent 2.5 years not allowing myself to feel, something uncomplicated and enormous and quietly terrifying. She pressed the button. Waited. The doors opened. She stepped in. Just before they closed, she turned and looked at me across the length of the office. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. The doors slid shut, and I turned back to my desk and sat with the reality that the woman I had carefully not loved for 2.5 years had just told me she was leaving in 8 weeks, and that the conversation we had been not having for all that time had finally irrevocably begun. 8 weeks was not long. 8 weeks was, I thought, exactly enough time to learn whether what was between us was strong enough to survive the thing she had to do next. It had to be enough, because she had chosen her dream, and I had meant what I said in that parking lot. If I couldn't stand beside her in that, then I had no business standing beside her at all. 8 weeks. I picked up my pen and went back to work. 8 weeks sounds like a long time until you're inside it. Then it moves like water through your hands fast, constant, gone before you understand what you were holding. The week after, Sophia told me she was taking the Seattle position. We didn't talk about it again. Not directly. We worked. We had meetings. We argued about a product roadmap on Wednesday afternoon with the same energy we'd always had, her pushing for a redesign. I thought was premature, me defending a timeline she thought was unrealistic. Both of us talking over each other until Marcus knocked on the glass wall of the conference room and told us to keep it down because the sales team was on a call. We looked at each other through the glass. We both started laughing at the same time. And Marcus walked away, shaking his head, the way he'd been shaking his head at the two of us for years, probably wondering when we were going to figure out what the rest of the office had apparently already decided. That was Wednesday. Thursday evening I texted her dinner Friday. Not fake this time. She replied in 40 seconds. It better not be. We went to a quiet place on South Lamar. No family watching. No ex-boyfriend across the table. No rules we'd agreed to in a parking garage. Just the two of us, sitting across from each other with real menus and the particular awareness of people who are figuring out what they are to each other. It was the most comfortable and the most terrifying meal I had ever sat through. Comfortable because she was Sophia and I had spent 3 years learning how to exist in her company without effort. Terrifying because every exchange now carried a different weight. Every pause meant something. Every time she laughed at something I said, I felt it differently than I had before. "You're nervous," she said about 20 minutes in. "I'm not nervous," I said. "Daniel, you've rearranged your silverware 4 times. I looked down. She was correct. "I'm slightly nervous," I said. "Why?" She looked genuinely curious. "You've had dinner with me 100 times. "Not like this," I said. She considered that. "Fair," she said. And then she smiled, not the smile she used in meetings, or the one she used with her family, but the one that was actually hers, the one that reached her eyes and had no agenda. "I'm nervous too, for what it's worth." "You don't look it." "I've had more practice hiding it," she said. That sentence opened something between us, and the rest of dinner moved differently after it. Easier. More real. We talked about things we'd never talked about directly. Not the careful professional conversations we'd been having for 3 years, but the actual material of two people's lives. She told me about her father and why his Sunday phone calls mattered so much. I told her about my older brother and the particular kind of pressure that comes from growing up in a family where success looks like one specific shape and you spend 20 years trying to fit yourself into it. She listened, the way she always listened, completely, without rehearsing her response while I was still talking. And when I finished, she said, "You never told me that before." "You never asked," I said. "You never seemed like someone who wanted to be asked," she said. I thought about that honestly. "You're right," I said. "I don't usually, but you're different." "Different how?" "You ask questions because you actually want to know the answer," I said. "Not because asking sounds like the right thing to do." She was quiet for a moment. "That might be the best thing anyone has ever said about me," she said. "I mean it," I said. "I know you do." She looked at me with that direct, open gaze. "That's why it counts." We stayed at that restaurant for 3 hours. The dinner crowd thinned out around us, and the music got quieter, and the servers started doing the closing side work, and we were still at our table talking, and nobody rushed us, and we didn't rush ourselves. When we finally walked out, it was close to 11, and the October air had gone cold enough to feel it. She stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face me. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." "Okay." She took a breath. "I am going to Seattle in January. That is decided, and I am not going to undecide it. And I am—" She paused, choosing. "I am standing here on this sidewalk knowing that the person I most want to spend time with between now and then is you. Which is either the best timing in the world or the worst, and I genuinely cannot tell which." I waited because she had asked me to let her finish. "And I don't know how to do this," she said. "I don't have a framework for it. I don't know what to call it or how to structure it. I just know that you told me the truth in that car, and I'm choosing to tell you the truth here, which is that I don't want to waste what's left of these 8 weeks pretending we're still just coworkers who get coffee sometimes." She stopped. She'd finished. "My turn," I said. "Your turn," she said. "We don't need a framework," I said. "We just need to show up, that's all. Every day between now and January we just show up, and we figure the rest out as we go." She looked at me for a moment. "That's very simple." "Most true things are," I said, and then she did something I had not anticipated. She reached out and took my hand. Not grabbed it, not urgently, not the way she'd grabbed it under the dinner table the previous Friday. She just reached out and took it. Deliberately and quietly, the way you take something you've decided belongs to you. I held on. We walked to her building like that. At the entrance, she stopped and we stood there, and I was aware of how the moment was arranged and what it might become. But she just squeezed my hand once and let go. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," I agreed. She went inside. I walked home. And I thought 8 weeks. We had 8 weeks to build something that was going to have to be strong enough to survive 6 months of distance. No guarantees. No roadmap. Just 2 people who had taken 3 years to finally say the truth and now had a limited window to decide what to do with it. 8 weeks. I was going to make every single one of them count. The weeks moved. We settled into something that didn't have a name but had a shape. We had dinner twice a week. We texted throughout the day, not constantly, not urgently, but the kind of back and forth that happens when someone becomes the person you narrate your day to. She'd send me something that irritated her about a vendor call. I'd respond with something absurd I'd witnessed in the hallway. Small exchanges that accumulated into something that felt like presence. At work, we maintained the agreement. Professional. Clean. No one needed to know what was happening between us while it was still in the process of becoming something we understood ourselves. But the office has eyes the way all offices have eyes, and one. Tuesday in the middle of week 3, my colleague James pulled me aside after a team stand-up and said very casually, "Is something going on with you and Sophia?" I looked at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "She laughed at your joke in the stand-up. She never laughs at your jokes." "My jokes are good," I said. "Your jokes are fine," he said. "She doesn't usually laugh at them." I told him he was imagining things. He gave me the look of a man who was not imagining things and walked away. That evening I texted Sophia. James noticed something. Her response came back fast. "What did you tell him? That he was imagining it?" "Good," she wrote. Then a few seconds later, "He's not imagining it though." "No," I wrote back. "He's not." A pause. "Are we okay keeping it quiet a little longer?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm not in a hurry." "Thank you," she wrote. "Then I have to tell you something." I looked at my phone. "Ryan texted me today," she wrote. I sat down. I had not been sitting down. I sat down. "Okay," I typed. He said he wanted to apologize for how things ended. He said the dinner made him realize some things. I thought about Ryan Caldwell turning his water glass at that dinner table. I thought about the way he'd said she never lived in the past with that particular combination of admiration and regret. "What did you say?" I typed. I haven't responded yet, she wrote. I wanted to tell you first. Something in me settled at that. The fact that she'd told me before responding. The fact that I was the person she defaulted to when something came up that required honesty. You don't owe him a response, I wrote. But if you want to respond, that's your call. I know it's my call, she wrote. I'm asking what you think. I thought about it genuinely because she deserved a genuine answer and not a defensive one. I think he probably means it, I typed. I think sometimes it takes watching someone move forward to understand what you had. If he's a decent person and the apology is real, you can acknowledge it. You don't have to give him more than that. A long pause. That is remarkably not territorial of you, she wrote. I'm working on being a reasonable person, I wrote back. You're succeeding, she wrote. And then, this is why. This is why, what? This is why I asked you that night. Not James. Not anyone else. You. I didn't respond to that immediately. I sat with it. Let it be what it was, which was significant. Go respond to Ryan, I finally wrote. Be who you are. You'll know what to say. She did respond to Ryan. She told me the next day. She'd acknowledged the apology, wished him well, and kept it brief. He'd replied graciously, and that was the end of it. A door she'd already closed, properly sealed. She told me all of this over coffee on a Wednesday morning at our corner table, and when she finished, she looked at me and said, "He asked if I was happy." What did you tell him? She looked at me steadily. I told him I was getting there. 3 weeks before her departure, something shifted in the texture of our time together. It wasn't dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic. It was the particular ache of things that are good and finite. Every dinner we had, I was aware of this number of dinners left. Every evening we spent together had the quality of something being held carefully because it was going to have to be set down. She felt it too. I knew she felt it because she stopped being as breezy about the Seattle departure as she'd been in the early weeks. She'd started saying things like, "When I get back," the way people say things when they need to hear themselves say them. When I get back. When I get back. As if saying it enough times would guarantee it. One evening in December, 10 days before she was scheduled to fly out, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door, and she was standing there with her coat still on and her bag over her shoulder, and the particular expression of someone who has had a long conversation with themselves on the drive over and arrived having made a decision. "I need to talk," she said. "Come in," I said, and stepped back. She didn't sit down. She stood in the middle of my living room with her arms crossed and her coat still on and said, "I'm scared." "Of Seattle," I said. "No," she said. "Of leaving you." I was quiet. "I have been telling myself for 6 weeks that I can do this," she said. "The distance, the calls, the missing, whatever this is, I can manage it. I've managed harder things." She looked at me. "But I woke up this morning and I thought about January 7th, about getting on that plane, and She stopped. "I didn't like how that felt." "Sophia." I crossed the room and stood in front of her. She was doing the thing where she held herself very together on the outside, while something underneath it. I had seen it at her sister's dinner table. I knew what it looked like now. "You are going to Seattle," I said. "Not because I'm sending you there. Because it is what you are supposed to do next. You know that." "I know," she said. "And I am going to be here," I said. "Not going anywhere, not reassessing, not getting philosophical about distance and what it means. Just here." Her arms, which had been crossed tightly across her chest, loosened slightly. "You can't promise that," she said, not challenging me, just being honest. "I'm not promising certainty," I said. "I'm promising intent. There's a difference. And if you need me to lay out an argument for why this is survivable, I will, because I've been building that case in my head for 6 weeks, and it's pretty solid." Despite herself, she almost smiled. "You built a case." "I'm a project manager," I said. "I build cases. It's what I do." "Okay," she said. "Make your case." I looked at her. "We have phones. We have video calls. We have the fact that we spent 3 years learning to communicate clearly with each other because we worked together and had no choice. We know each other's rhythms. We know when the other person needs space and when they need to be pushed back. 6 months is a long time. It is not forever. And when you come back, I paused. When you come back as someone who did the thing she was supposed to do. And I want that person. I want the version of you that did the hard thing. She was looking at me with that expression she'd been wearing more frequently in the last few weeks. The one that I'd stopped trying to decode and had started simply accepting. You are, she said, extremely inconvenient. I know. I had a perfectly functional plan to keep my emotional life simple and manageable. I know. And then you went and... She gestured at me vaguely. All of this, whatever this is. I did, I said. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, she said. Right, I said. She finally took off her coat, which was for Sophia an entire statement. She sat on my couch, and I sat beside her, and we talked for 4 hours. Really talked the way we'd been talking for weeks, but with the particular intensity that comes from the knowledge of departure. She told me about the Seattle role in detail, the things she was excited about, and the things that frightened her. I told her what I was genuinely going to struggle with, which was the time difference, and the calendar management, and the gap between what a text message can carry and what a conversation needs to carry. She said, every Sunday, call, non-negotiable. Sunday evening, I said. Your time or mine? Yours, she said. I'll call you. Okay. And if something is wrong, she said, we say it. We don't let things build. Agreed, I said. Because I have watched relationships fail at distance, she said. And the way they fail is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's things that don't get said that become things that can't be said. Then we say them, I said. She looked at me. You make it sound easy. It won't be easy, I said. It'll be worth it. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, the thing that cracked something open in my chest. Daniel, am I worth it really? Because I need you to think about that honestly. Not just say it because it's the right thing to say. I need you to think about whether a woman who is leaving for 6 months and has no idea what she looks like in a relationship because she has spent 6 years prioritizing everything else. I need you to think about whether that is actually something you want. The room was quiet. I thought about what she was really asking. She wasn't asking me to validate her. She was asking me to be honest with her the same way she had been honest with me. She was asking me not to perform reassurance, but to actually answer the question. Yes, I said. Completely and without reservation. Why? Because wanting someone who is whole is not a burden, I said. It's the only thing worth wanting. You don't need to be less ambitious or less independent or less yourself to justify being chosen. You just need to be exactly what you are. And what you are is someone I have been paying attention to for 3 years because you are worth paying attention to. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, I'm not used to that. I know, I said. Get used to it. She laughed, small and real and hers. And then she leaned her head back against the couch cushion and looked at the ceiling, and I sat beside her, and we didn't move for a while, just existing in the same space with all of it settled between us. 8 weeks went fast, she finally said. Yeah, I said. They did. We built something though, she said. Right in 8 weeks. We actually built something. We did, I said. She turned her head to look at me. Promise me it doesn't fall apart while I'm gone. I'm not going to let it fall apart, I said. But you have to promise me the same thing. I promise, she said, simply, directly, the way she did everything. That was the night 9 days before she flew to Seattle that I understood what we actually had. Not the fake version from the dinner. Not the careful professional version from 3 years of working alongside each other. The real one. The one that had taken all of that time to build and had only finally shown itself because she grabbed my tie in the office one Friday evening and whispered a question I never expected. What we had was 2 people who had chosen each other slowly, honestly, and without shortcuts. And those are the only things that last. January 6th arrived, the way departure days always arrive too quickly and with too much ordinary around them. She had a morning flight. I met her outside her building at 5:30 in the morning because she had asked me to, and I would have come at any hour she named. She came out with 2 bags and a carry-on, and the particular composure of a woman executing a plan she'd made. I took the heavier bag from her. "You didn't have to come this early," she said. "I know," I said. We rode to the airport mostly in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind that happens between people who have said enough that silence doesn't need to fill the space. At the departure's drop-off. She got out, and I got out, and we stood on the curb with her bags around us, and the noise of the airport, and the pre-dawn dark, and she turned to look at me. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. "Sunday," she said. "Sunday," I confirmed. She looked at me for a moment longer than the practical moment required. Then she said, "I don't do grand gestures, Daniel. You know that." "I know," I said, "but I want you to know." She stopped, tried again. "What you said in the car that night, about wanting to stop pretending. I want you to know that." Her jaw set slightly the way it did when she was pushing through something hard. "I stopped pretending a long time before that. I just didn't say it." I held her gaze. "I know," I said. "I know that now." She nodded once. Then she picked up her bags, and she walked through those sliding doors, and she didn't look back, because she was Sophia, and Sophia committed to her decisions, and I stood on that curb in the January cold, watching the doors slide shut behind her. 6 months. I turned and walked back to the car, and I thought about what she'd said I stopped pretending a long time before that, which meant that everything I'd thought was one-sided hadn't been. Which meant that we'd spent time apart that we could have spent together, except neither of us had been ready to say it until a fake dinner and a parked car and a night that neither of us had planned made it impossible to keep the truth inside any longer. I drove home through the quiet pre-dawn Austin streets, and I thought, this is not the end of something. This is the structure of something. This is what it looks like when 2 people choose each other slowly enough to be sure. 6 months, every Sunday. I could do this. We could do this. The first call came 4 days later, a Wednesday, not a Sunday, because she had found something funny at her new office, and she needed to tell me immediately and couldn't wait. She called at 7:15 her time and talked for 40 minutes about a coworker named Brett who had strong opinions about cold brew coffee and the correct organization of shared design files. And I sat in my kitchen and laughed and thought about how even 4 days into 6 months of distance, she was still the person I most wanted to talk to. "You called early," I said when she was winding down. "I know," she said, and I could hear the smile in it. "Is that okay?" "Sophia," I said, "you can call whenever you want." A pause on her end. "I know," she said again, softer this time. "Get some sleep," I said. "It's late there." "Yeah." She didn't hang up immediately. "Daniel." "Yeah." "I'm glad I went," she said. "And I'm glad you're there." I let that sit for a moment. "Get some sleep," I said again, gently. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Sophia." The call ended. I sat in my kitchen in the quiet of my apartment and thought about a woman 800 miles away who had spent 3 years being the most remarkable person in any room I shared with her, and who was now being remarkable in rooms I couldn't see, and who had called me on a Wednesday because she found something funny and couldn't wait until Sunday. And I thought, whatever comes next, this is real. Whatever the next 6 months look like, whatever gets hard and stays hard, the thing between us is real. That's the only thing you can build on. Everything else is just time. The first month was the easiest. I know that sounds backward. People assume the beginning of distance is the hardest part. The adjustment, the absence, the reconfiguring of a daily life that had been built around someone's proximity. And there is an adjustment. There is absolutely an adjustment. But the first month has momentum behind it. You're still running on the energy of the goodbye, the clarity of the commitment, the freshness of the thing you've just named out loud. You're not yet tired. You haven't yet hit the specific wall that distance builds not all at once, but brick by brick in the small accumulated moments when you reach for your phone and calculate the time difference before you dial and decide it's too late and put the phone back down. The first month, Sophia and I talked constantly, not in the desperate way of people clinging to something they're afraid of losing, but in the natural way of two people who had finally stopped rationing their communication and were making up for lost time. She called on Wednesdays and Sundays as promised. I called on Tuesdays because I'd found a rhythm where Tuesday evenings were my quietest, and I could give her my full attention without half my brain still running work problems. She was thriving in Seattle. That came through clearly and immediately. The startup she was working with was aggressive and smart, and they had given her real authority over the design infrastructure, which meant she was building something from the ground up with her name on every decision. She talked about it the way she talked about her best project work, with the specific energy of someone who is operating exactly at the level they're supposed to be operating at. Stretched, but not overwhelmed. Challenged, but not lost. I listened to all of it, and I felt two things simultaneously, the way you often feel two things simultaneously when you love someone. I felt proud of her in a way that had nothing performative about it, nothing that required her to see it or acknowledge it. And I felt the quiet, unglamorous ache of missing a person's physical presence. Not dramatically, not in a way that interfered with functioning. Just the low-grade awareness that the chair across from mine at the coffee shop on 5th and Bowie was empty and she was 800 miles away, being extraordinary in a room I couldn't see. February arrived and the first real test arrived with it. It was a Thursday night, week 5 of 6 months. She called at 9:30 her time, which was unusual. She was normally in bed by 10 because the startup ran early mornings and she had adapted her schedule to match. When my phone lit up at that hour, I registered it before I answered. "Hey," I said. "Everything okay?" A pause. Not long, just a half beat. "I had a hard day," she said. In 2 months of daily communication, she had not once said that. She processed hard days internally, reported on them after the fact, with the analytical distance of someone reviewing an event that was already over. She had never called me in the middle of one. "Talk to me," I said. She told me that the startup's lead investor had come in that day for a quarterly review and had spent 40 minutes in a meeting questioning the design direction she had spent 5 weeks building. Not questioning in the productive, collaborative way that good feedback arrives. Questioning it in the way that men of a certain type question the work of women in rooms where they feel their authority is not being sufficiently acknowledged. Dismissive. Slightly condescending. Phrased as curiosity, but carrying the unmistakable weight of someone who had already decided the answer before he asked the question. "And the CEO just sat there," she said. Her voice was controlled, but I knew the difference between Sophia being calm and Sophia holding something at a specific distance. He said nothing. He let it happen. He looked at me 3 times and looked away. "What did you do?" I asked. "I held my ground," she said. "I answered every question directly. I walked him through the rationale. I did not apologize for a single decision." "Good," I said. "But Daniel..." She stopped. I heard her exhale. "I am tired. I am so tired of walking into rooms and having to prove from zero every time. Of having to be twice as precise and twice as prepared and half as emotional as anyone else in the room just to be taken seriously. I knew it was going to be like this. I have always known it was going to be like this. Another pause. I just wanted to tell someone. I didn't want to process it alone tonight. I sat very still on my couch in Austin, Texas, holding my phone and thinking about what she actually needed from this call. Not advice, she'd already handled it. She'd handled it brilliantly by the sound of it. Not reassurance that she was right. She knew she was right. She needed exactly what she'd said to not process it alone. "You're not alone," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why I called." "Tell me the rest," I said. "All of it. Don't edit." She told me all of it. Unedited. The meeting in detail. The CEO's silence, the conversation she'd had afterward with her direct colleague Miriam, who had been in the room and had found her in the hallway afterward, and said quietly, "You were right, and you were brilliant, and don't let him take that from you." She told me about eating dinner alone in her apartment, and the particular silence of a space that is functional and adequate, and not home. She told me she had called her father after dinner, and he had said the right things, in the way fathers say the right things warmly and slightly generally, and it had helped, but not quite enough. "And then I called you," she said. "And then you called me," I said. "Yeah." Her voice was quieter now. The held-at-distance quality had softened. "Is it weird that talking to you is different from talking to my dad? Like the same situation, the same facts, but it lands differently when I say it to you." "No," I said. "It's not weird." "Why is it different?" I thought about that honestly. "Because your dad loves you and wants you to be okay," I said. "And I love you and want you to be right." The line went quiet. I realized what I'd said about a half-second after I said it. The specific word I had used. The first time I had used it. Not in a letter. Not in a text where it could be read and reread and given time to settle before a response was required. Out loud. On a phone call. In the middle of a conversation about something else entirely, as casually as if I said it every day, which I had not. Sophia was silent. "Sophia," I said. "I heard you," she said. "Okay," I said. And then, because I had meant it, and I was not going to unmake it, I mean it. Another silence. Longer this time. "Daniel," she said. Her voice had changed completely. Not the controlled professional voice, not the tired honest voice from earlier in the call. Something else. Something I didn't have a clean label for. "You can't just say that on a random Thursday in February and expect me to know what to do with it." "I'm not expecting you to do anything with it," I said. "I'm just not going to pretend I didn't say it." "Daniel, you called me because talking to me lands differently," I said. "That's the same thing I said, just in different words. I'm just being more direct." A long pause. Then she said quietly, "I love you too. You complete idiot." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was the most Sophia possible way to say it, real and warm and simultaneously exasperated, as if she was annoyed at both of us for taking this long to arrive at something that had apparently been true for a while. "I know the timing is terrible," she said. "February on a phone call is not ideal." I agreed. "We are not telling this story," she said. "We are never telling anyone how we said that for the first time." "Absolutely not," I said. "It's a terrible story." "It's a wonderful story," she said. "But we're telling everyone it happened differently." "Agreed," I said. "We'll figure out a better version." She laughed. And I sat in my apartment in Austin, with my chest full of something. I didn't have a more precise word for than relief, not because I'd been uncertain, but because there is a specific kind of relief in a thing being named that you have been carrying unnamed for a long time. "Get some sleep," I said. "You have a design infrastructure to defend tomorrow." "I do," she said, and I could hear the shift in her, the exhaustion still there, but under it something steadier, something settled. "Thank you for picking up." "Always," I said. "Always." March arrived and brought the first real crack. Not a dramatic crack. Not a fight. Something quieter and more dangerous, a week where the calls were shorter than usual, and both of us knew why, and neither of us said it directly. She was deep in the most demanding phase of the Seattle project. The investor pushback had created pressure that rippled through every layer of the work, and she was managing a team of 5 people while redesigning components she'd already built once and absorbing the political complexity of an organization under scrutiny. She had less time. She had less energy. When we talked, she was present but thinner, the way a phone signal gets thin when you're at the edge of range. Still there, just reduced. And I was dealing with my own version of the same thing. The Q4 rollout at work had generated complications that pushed into the new year, and Marcus had put me on a second parallel project that was eating the margins of my calendar. I was tired in the particular way of overextension, not sick, not broken, just consistently running 10% below full capacity and not recovering overnight the way I normally did. By Wednesday of that third week in March, we hadn't had a real conversation in 11 days. We'd texted. We'd had 2 calls that lasted under 15 minutes each and ended because one of us had something to return to. And I had felt the gap widening, not dramatically but steadily, and had told myself it was temporary logistics, the nature of two busy people doing hard work, and that telling myself that was true, and also was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I was scared. Not of Sophia. Not of us. Scared of the specific thing she had named before she left relationships that fail at distance. Fail quietly through things that don't get said, that become things that can't be said. I had 11 days of smaller than usual conversations sitting in my chest, and I had not said that out loud to her yet. Thursday evening my phone rang, her name on the screen. I picked up immediately. Hey. Hey. Her voice was tired in the way it had been for 3 weeks. I only have about 30 minutes. I have an early call. That's okay, I said. And then I did the thing I had promised we would both do. Can I say something before we get to anything else? A pause. Yeah, of course. I've been feeling the distance this week, I said. Not in a crisis way. Just I'm aware of the gap, and I wanted to name it before it got bigger. Silence on her end. Daniel, she said. We said we'd say it, I said. So I'm saying it. I know, she said. And then slowly, I've felt it too. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to add pressure to what you're already carrying. That's exactly the thing that can't happen, I said. We can't start protecting each other from the truth. That's how the quiet gets loud. Another silence. Longer. You're right, she said. I know, I said. It doesn't feel good to be right about this particular thing. No, she said. It doesn't. A breath. I'm tired, Daniel. I'm genuinely deeply tired. The project is in its hardest phase, and I am giving it everything I have, and sometimes at the end of the day, I don't have the version of me available that you deserve to talk to. I don't need the best version, I said. I just need the real one. The real one is exhausted and slightly overwhelmed and trying to hold about 9 things at once, she said. That's the one I want, I said. I mean that. She was quiet for a moment. How are you? She asked. Actually, not fine, actually. Stretched, I said honestly. The parallel project is harder than I expected. I'm managing it, but I'm not managing it gracefully. Why didn't you say that before? Same reason you didn't say yours, I said. She made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sigh. We are both terrible at this. We are learning, I said. We need to be better at it, she said. We agreed. We did, I said. So let's be better. Okay, she said. And then, I miss you. Is that I know we talk about that carefully like it's something to be managed. But tonight, I just miss you. Just straightforwardly. I miss you too, I said. Straightforwardly. 3 more months, she said. 12 weeks, I said. We can do 12 weeks. We can do 12 weeks, she repeated. Like a confirmation. Like a contract signed between the two of us in the middle of a Thursday night with 30 minutes on the clock, and both of us running on fumes. Tell me something good, she said. From your week. Something that had nothing to do with work. I thought about it. I found the coffee shop on 5th and Bowie now has your order memorized. They make it before I sit down. She laughed. Real genuine surprised. They do not. Thursday woman takes black coffee. That is what the barista said to me last week. I did not correct her. That is... She laughed again. That is either very sweet or slightly concerning. Leaning sweet, I said. Yeah, she said, still smiling, I could hear it. Yeah, leaning sweet. We talked for 42 minutes, not 30. Neither of us mentioned the early call again. April was better. May was better still. The Seattle project cleared its crisis point somewhere in the middle of April when the investor faced with data Sophia had compiled with the meticulous precision of someone who had been building the argument for 8 weeks, finally conceded that the design direction was sound. She called me the evening it happened at 7 her time, and the first thing she said when I picked up was, I won. Just those 2 words. Tell me everything, I said. She told me everything, and it took an hour and a half, and it was one of the best conversations we'd had since she left. Not because the content was romantic or tender, but because she was completely alive in it, that specific electric energy she carried when she had done something she was proud of, and I got to sit in the presence of it even from 800 miles away. And that was, I thought nothing. That was something substantial. I wish you were here, she said when she'd wound down. I want to celebrate properly. Get Miriam, I said. Go somewhere and celebrate properly. You earned it. You're not jealous that you're missing it. I'm thrilled you have Miriam, I said honestly. You need someone there. I can't be there. She can. Use her. A pause. You know, Sophia said, I spent a lot of years around men who would have handled that question very differently. I know, I said. I noticed, she said, early on, that you weren't like that. Is that what did it? I said. My notably non-territorial personality. She laughed. Among other things. A pause. Daniel. Yeah. I'm coming home in 6 weeks. I know, I said. I have a countdown. You do not have a countdown. I absolutely have a countdown. On your phone. On my phone and on a sticky note on my refrigerator, I said. My dignity is fully gone and I have made peace with that. She laughed so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. And then she said quiet under the laughter, 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I said. Go celebrate. She went. I sat in my apartment with my phone in my hand and thought about 6 weeks. 42 days. The countdown on my refrigerator said 43, but I was rounding down and that was nobody's business. The final weeks move differently. There's a specific quality to the time before someone you love comes back to you. It has weight. It has a texture that regular time doesn't have. Every day that passed, I felt both the shrinking of the distance and a strange reluctance to rush it, the way you slow down when something beautiful is almost over, because you want the approach to last. We had survived. That was the fact I kept returning to. 6 months of distance, and 2 full-time demanding jobs, and a February phone call on a random Thursday, and a hard week in March, and a conversation we'd promised each other and kept. We had survived all of it, and we were still standing still, choosing each other, still looking forward to the same moment the day she came back. But 10 days before her return, she called on a Tuesday. Not her day, not mine. I picked up, and I knew immediately from her silence before she spoke that something had happened. Daniel, she said. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, she said. But I need to tell you something. Okay. The CEO called me into his office today, she said. He offered me an extension. The room went quiet around me. Not literally, the television was on, the ambient noise of the apartment was exactly what it always was. But inside me, something went very quiet. What kind of extension? I said. 3 months, she said. They want to take the infrastructure I built through a full product launch. They want me there for the implementation. It would take it from 6 months to 9. She paused. It's a significant offer, Daniel, financially and professionally. It's the kind of thing that... Sophia. I kept my voice steady. Stop explaining why it's a good offer. I know why it's a good offer. Okay, she said. Tell me what you want, I said. A long pause. I don't know, she said. I genuinely don't know. 2 weeks ago I would have said that yes immediately. Now She stopped. Now, I said. Now I'm sitting here trying to figure out if the reason I'm hesitating is because it's actually the wrong decision, or because I've been away for 5 months and I'm tired and I want to come home. Her voice was careful and precise and very honest. And I can't tell which one is real. I sat with that for a moment. Can I ask you something? I said. Yes. If I weren't in Austin, I said. If this was year 2 before everything changed, and someone offered you a 3-month extension on a project like this, what would you do? Silence. I would take it, she said, without hesitating. Okay, I said. Daniel, okay means okay, I said. Okay means I hear you, and I'm not going to be the reason you turn down something you would have taken without hesitating in any other version of this situation. That is not a simple thing to say, she said. No, I said. It's not. Are you? She stopped. Tried again. Are you actually okay with this? Not performing okay? Actually. I thought about it honestly. I thought about 43 days on a sticky note on my refrigerator becoming 43 days plus 90 more. I thought about 3 months. I thought about what the last 5 months had cost and built simultaneously. And I thought about the woman on the other end of this call, who was trying in the middle of her own complicated feelings to be completely honest with me, rather than simply tell me what she thought I needed to hear. "I'm disappointed," I said. "I want to be honest, I am genuinely disappointed. I've been looking forward to June 3rd for a long time." "Me too," she said quietly. "And I'm okay," I said. "Both of those things are true at the same time. I'm disappointed and I'm okay. Take the extension, Sophia." She didn't answer immediately. "I haven't decided yet," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm just telling you that if you decide yes, I'm not going anywhere. Nothing changes from my side. 90 days is 90 days. We've done 5 months. We can do 3 more. "You are," she said after a pause, "the most frustrating person to be in love with." "Why?" "Because you keep making it impossible to choose wrong," she said. "I want one bad option, just one. I want the decision to be easier." "I could start being terrible," I said. "Give you something concrete to weigh." "Please don't," she said. "Then you're stuck with me being reasonable," I said. She laughed. And then she stopped laughing, and in the quiet that followed, I heard something that sounded like her taking a breath that cost something. "I'm going to think about it," she said. "Until tomorrow." "Take the time you need," I said. "Call me when you know." "Okay," she said. "Sophia," I said, before she could hang up. "Yeah. Whatever you decide, you're not choosing between your career and me. You're just choosing the order of things. I'll still be here." A long silence. "I know," she said. "That's the part that makes it possible to think clearly." She called the next evening. "I turned it down," she said. "I was not prepared for that." "What?" I said. "I told the CEO thank you, and that I was honored, and that it wasn't the right time." She said it steadily. "He tried to negotiate. I didn't move." "Sophia." "Don't," she said. "Don't tell me I should have taken it." "I wasn't going to," I said. "I was going to ask if you're sure." "I am completely sure," she said. I figured out what the hesitation was. It wasn't tiredness. It wasn't wanting to come home. It was that I looked at 3 more months, and I realized the thing I was building toward was already built. The infrastructure is done. The team knows what they're doing. Staying would have been maintenance, not growth. And I don't do maintenance when there's something worth growing toward. She paused. "And there is something worth growing toward," she said. "Here. At home. With you." I sat in my kitchen in Austin, Texas, and let that land. "June 3rd, I said. "June 3rd, she confirmed. "I'll be at the airport," I said. "I know you will," she said. "Don't make a sign. Do not make a sign, Daniel." I said nothing. "Daniel." "I'm not making any promises about signs," I said. "Oh God," she said, and we both laughed, the way we'd been laughing for 6 months, across 800 miles. The way 2 people laugh when they've built something real, and they know it, and they're almost on the other side of the hardest part. 10 days. June 3rd. I started thinking about the sign. I made the sign. I want to be clear that I knew exactly what I was doing when I made it. I knew she had specifically, explicitly, with complete clarity, told me not to make a sign. I made it anyway. Not because I ignored her request, but because there are moments in a person's life when the right move is the slightly ridiculous one, and standing at an airport arrivals gate after 6 months of distance, with nothing in your hands, felt wrong in a way I couldn't justify professionally. The sign said, "Temporary boyfriend contract renewal pending." I had written it in black mark on a piece of cardboard. I'd cut from a shipping box at 11 the previous night, standing at my kitchen counter with the concentration of a man who understood that the presentation mattered. The letters were clean. The cardboard was straight. It was objectively a good sign. I got to Austin Bergstrom at 11:45 in the morning on June 3rd. Her flight landed at 12:18. I found a position at the arrivals barrier with good sight lines to the exit doors, and I stood there with my sign at my side, not raised yet, waiting. The 12:18 flight started releasing passengers at 12:41. I watched every face that came through those doors. And then I saw her. She came through with her carry-on over one shoulder and her phone in her hand, and she was already scanning the crowd, the way she did everything efficiently, systematically, looking for the specific thing she needed. She was wearing a gray coat I hadn't seen before, and her hair was slightly different, and she looked exactly like herself, and also like someone who had spent 6 months becoming more thoroughly herself, which is the only way I know how to describe it. She found me in about 4 seconds. Her eyes landed on my face first. Then they dropped to the sign. She stopped walking. The person behind her nearly ran into her. She read the sign once, twice. Then she looked up at me with an expression that I will spend the rest of my life being glad I was standing close enough to see. It was the expression of a woman who is trying very hard not to visibly react and failing completely. The specific collapse of composure that only happens when something catches you exactly right. She started walking toward me. Fast. "You made a sign," she said when she was close enough. "I did," I said. "I told you not to make a sign." "You did," I said. "Daniel." "Sophia." She looked at me for one full second, and then she walked the last 2 steps, and she put her arms around me, and I put mine around her, and we stood there in the middle of the arrivals hall at Austin Bergstrom, with people moving around us in every direction, and neither of us said anything for a long time, because there wasn't anything that needed to be said that wasn't already being said by the fact of us being in the same physical space for the first time in 148 days. She pulled back first, just far enough to look at my face. "You look good," she said. "You look incredible," I said. "I'm exhausted," she said. "You look incredible," I said again. She almost smiled. "The sign is terrible." "The sign is perfect," I said. "The sign is—" She looked down at it still in my hand. "It's actually pretty good." "Thank you," I said. "I worked on it." She took it from me, looked at it again, and then she did something I didn't expect. She folded it carefully twice and tucked it into her bag. "I'm keeping this," she said. "Yeah," I said. "Evidence," she said. "For when you try to deny you're a sentimental person." "I am not a sentimental person," I said. "You made a sign," she said. I stopped. "Fair." She laughed, and it was the same laugh she'd had on the phone, and also completely different, because it was in front of me in 3 dimensions in the real world, and I had apparently forgotten in 6 months just how good it felt to be in the same room as Sophia Bennett, laughing at something I'd said. We walked to the car. She talked the whole way about the flight, about the woman in the middle seat who had asked her 3 times what she did for work, and then spent 40 minutes explaining her nephew's startup as if Sophia might want to invest, about how Seattle had been cold until the last 2 weeks, and then suddenly beautiful in the way the Pacific Northwest is beautiful when it decides to cooperate, which is completely and without warning. I drove and listened and thought this. This is what I missed. Not the absence of loneliness. I had been fine. I had managed. I had built a functional daily life around the gap of her. What I had missed was this specific thing, Sophia, in full, unedited, real-time motion, filling a space with the particular energy that was entirely hers. We stopped for lunch before going anywhere else. Her choice, she said she'd been thinking about breakfast tacos for the last 2 weeks, and Seattle's version was not acceptable, and she needed the real thing immediately. We sat at a place on South Congress, the same strip where her sister's engagement dinner had happened 8 months earlier, and she ate with the focused satisfaction of someone returning to something she'd genuinely missed. "How does it feel?" I asked. "Being back." She considered it with real attention, the way she considered everything. "Strange," she said. "Like when you've been somewhere long enough that coming back feels like arriving somewhere new for a second, before it clicks back into familiar." "Does it feel like home?" I said. She looked at me across the table with the direct, unhurried gaze that I had missed every single day of 148 days. "You're here," she said. "So yes." I looked at her. "That was a very smooth answer," I said. "I've had 6 months to think about what to say when I got back." She said. "That's what you landed on." I landed on the truth, she said simply. I've been practicing saying those without editing them. I reached across the table and took her hand, and she let me, and that was in total the entirety of what needed to happen in that moment. The week after she came back had its own particular texture. The re-entry period that nobody talks about because the narrative always ends at the airport reunion. The sign, the embrace, as if arrival is the conclusion. It isn't the conclusion. Arrival is the beginning of a different and more complicated chapter. The one where two people who have been existing independently for 6 months, who have each developed rhythms and habits and small daily structures that don't include each other, have to figure out how to be in the same space again. It is not seamless. I want to say that clearly, because pretending it was seamless would be dishonest, and this story has been from the beginning committed to honesty. The first week, Sophia was jet-lagged in a way she refused to acknowledge. She kept insisting she was fine, and then falling asleep at 8:30 in the evening mid-sentence and waking up at 4 in the morning, wired and productive, which is not a schedule that coordinates well with a person who keeps normal hours. She also had opinions formed in Seattle about the organization of certain things that she was accustomed to having a particular way. And I had spent 6 months organizing the same things the way I found functional. And we had one genuinely irritating conversation on the 4th day about nothing important that was actually about the adjustment of two people recalibrating their proximity. We caught it. "We're doing the thing," she said in the middle of the irritating conversation. She stopped talking and said it flatly. "We are doing the thing." I agreed. "We promised we wouldn't do the thing." "We did," I said. "And here we are doing it." She looked at me for a moment. Then she sat down on the couch and said, "I'm adjusting. I didn't realize how much adjusting there would be." "Same," I said, and sat beside her. "Is that normal?" she asked. "To love someone and still need to adjust to being near them again?" "I think it might be the most normal thing in the world," I said. She thought about that. "That's somewhat reassuring." "Good," I said. "I missed you every day for 6 months," she said. "And now you're here and I'm still figuring out how to be around you. That's human," I said. "That's human." She leaned back against the couch and looked at the ceiling, which was a posture I had learned meant she was thinking through something she wasn't ready to say yet. I waited. "I'm afraid of wasting it," she said finally. "Wasting what?" "This." She gestured vaguely at the space between us. "What we have. I've been so careful with my career for so long, so deliberate, so strategic, and I don't know how to be that careful with something that matters this much." I looked at her. "You don't have to be strategic about this." "I know," she said. "That's exactly what terrifies me. Everything important in my life, I've been able to approach with a plan. And there is no plan for this." "Sure there is," I said. She looked at me. "What's the plan?" "Show up," I said. "Say the true thing. Don't let the quiet get loud. That's the whole plan. We've been running it for 6 months." She was quiet for a moment. "That's a very minimal plan." "It's a very effective plan," I said. "We have data." She almost smiled. "We have data," she agreed. "Sophia," I said. "Yeah." "Stop being afraid of wasting it," I said. "You can't waste something by being imperfect inside it. You can only waste it by walking away from it." She looked at me steadily. "You're very clear about this." "I've had 6 months of phone calls and sticky note countdowns to get clear about this," I said. "I'm extremely clear." She held my gaze for a moment. Then she said, Okay, I believe you." And that was the adjustment conversation. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just two people naming the thing that was complicated and then deciding together what to do with it. The way we'd been doing things since October. 3 weeks after she came back, James stopped me in the hallway at work. "Okay," he said without preamble. I was not imagining things. "James, I watched you two in the project meeting this morning," he said. "That is not the energy of coworkers." "We're handling it professionally," I said. "You looked at her for 3 seconds when she made that point about the timeline," he said. "Nobody looks at a coworker for 3 seconds." "It was a good point about the timeline," I said. "Daniel." He looked at me with the expression of a man who has been patiently waiting for confirmation of something he's known for a while. How long? I looked at him. Longer than I'd like to admit. He shook his head slowly. You two are unbelievable, he said. The entire office knew before either of you did. That's a slight exaggeration, I said. Linda in accounting had a timeline, he said. An actual documented timeline. I stared at him. Linda in accounting does not have a timeline. Linda in accounting absolutely has a timeline, he said, and walked away. I stood in the hallway of our office and thought about Linda in accounting and her timeline, and the fact that apparently two people who had spent 3 years being meticulously professional had been approximately as subtle as a weather event. And then I thought about how little that mattered compared to the fact that it was real, that we had gotten there, that it had taken a fake dinner and a parking garage, and 6 months of Sunday calls, and a February phone call, and a cardboard sign, but we had gotten there. Marcus called me into his office that afternoon. I sat across from him, and he looked at me with the expression of a man who has managed people long enough to know when something in his team has shifted. You and Sophia, he said. Not a question. Yes, I said. How long has this been? It's recent, I said. Officially. He considered that. And professionally, I need to know it's handled. It's handled, I said. We're on the same page about what work looks like. It hasn't changed anything in how we function on a team. He looked at me for a long moment, with the assessing gaze of a man deciding whether he believes something. Good, he finally said. Because losing either of you would be a significant problem, and losing both of you in some kind of catastrophic outcome would be a disaster. Noted, I said. Also, he said, and his expression shifted into something that was almost a smile. It's about time. I looked at him. Did you also have a timeline? I had an opinion, he said. Get back to work. I got back to work. That evening, I told Sophia about Marcus and the timeline and Linda in accounting. We were sitting at her kitchen table, which had become the place we ended most evenings. Her place or mine. The kitchen table. The particular intimacy of people who talk through things while food is happening and the day is winding down. She put her fork down when I got to the Linda in accounting part. She has a timeline, Sophia said. Apparently. An actual documented timeline. That's what James says. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then, I need to see that timeline. You absolutely cannot ask Linda in accounting to see her timeline, I said. I'm not going to ask, she said. I'm going to find out through appropriate channels. What appropriate channels? I have coffee with Linda on Thursdays, she said. I stared at her. You have coffee with Linda on Thursdays. We've been doing it for 2 years, she said. She's extremely insightful. About people's romantic timelines, apparently, I said. Among other things, she said. She picked her fork back up. I'll report back. I looked at her across the kitchen table. This woman who had grabbed my tie in an office at 6:47 on a Friday evening and whispered a question I never expected. Who had sat across from me at a dinner pretending to be something we were actually becoming. Who had told me the truth in a parking lot and then taken a job 800 miles away and called me from Seattle on a Thursday in February and said I love you, you complete idiot, in the most Sophia possible way. What, she said, because I'd been looking at her for several seconds. Nothing, I said. Just, I stopped. Daniel. You're exactly who I thought you were, I said. When I first started paying attention, you're exactly that person. She looked at me. Is that? She paused. Is that a good thing? It's the best thing, I said. I spent 3 years watching you and I got it right. That doesn't happen as often as people pretend it does. Usually you build a person up in your head, and the reality is narrower. You weren't narrower. She set her fork down again, fully this time. Daniel Brooks, she said. Yeah. You are going to make me cry in my own kitchen. I'm just being accurate, I said. Stop being accurate, she said. But she was smiling in the way that was entirely hers. Can't help it, I said. It's a character flaw. The moment passed, the way those moments do, back into dinner, back into conversation, back into the ordinary rhythm of a Tuesday evening. But it left something behind, the way those moments always leave something behind. A residue of clarity. A confirmation of something you suspected but needed to hear said plainly. 2 months after she came back on a Saturday in August, she asked me to come with her to Claire's baby shower. The same family, the same orbit. Her mother, her aunts, the full range of people who had watched us perform a relationship at an engagement dinner 10 months earlier, without knowing that what they were watching was something in the process of becoming real. I said yes immediately. We drove to the same house where the dinner had been, and we walked in together, and her mother was the first person to see us. She looked at Sophia. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at our hands, which were linked the way hands link, when two people have stopped thinking about it, and it's simply become the default arrangement. Then she looked at her daughter and said, "I knew it." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Mom?" "At the engagement dinner," her mother said with the satisfaction of a woman whose read of a situation has been confirmed. "I told your Aunt Patricia. I said that man is not pretending." I felt Sophia go very still beside me. I looked at her mother with what I hoped was a neutral expression. "I wasn't pretending," I said. "That's accurate." Her mother took both of my hands in hers. "You're a patient man," she said. "She was worth the patience," I said. She squeezed my hands and let go, and then she turned to Sophia and said quietly, but not quietly enough, "He's a keeper, Sophie. Don't overthink it." Sophia said, "Mom." Her mother said, "I'm just saying." And then she moved away to welcome other guests and left us standing in the entryway, and I looked at Sophia and she looked at me. "I told you," she said. "What did you tell me?" "That she was going to be unbearable about this." "She said I was a keeper," I said. "I think that's objectively positive." "She's going to be unbearable," Sophia repeated. But she was squeezing my hand as she said it. The baby shower was 2.5 hours of her family in full effect, warm and overwhelming and collectively holding opinions about everyone's life, with the cheerful invasiveness of people who genuinely love each other and express it through sustained interest in each other's choices. Sophia navigated it the way she navigated everything, with composure and dry humor, and the specific ease of someone who has made her peace with the terms of being loved by particular people. And I sat beside her the whole time, and felt with the particular clarity of a moment that knows it matters that this was what it was supposed to look like. Not the fake version. Not the performed version. This her beside me, real chosen, rolling her eyes at her aunt's third question about timelines, and then laughing about it with me on the drive home. On the way back she said, "Ryan was not there." I had not thought about Ryan in months. "Okay," I said. "I thought you should know," she said, "in case you were keeping track." "I wasn't keeping track," I said honestly. She glanced at me. "I know," she said. "That's why I thought you should know." I understood what she meant. She was telling me not because she thought I needed the information, but because it was a thing she'd noticed, and she had committed to saying the thing she noticed. That was us now. That was how we worked. "He sent a gift," she said, "for Claire's baby, very tasteful." "That sounds like him," I said. "It does," she said. And then, "He found someone. I heard from Claire. He's happy." "Good," I said. And I meant it, completely. "Yeah," she said. "Good." And that was the entirety of that conversation, because that chapter was fully closed, and had been for a long time. And the thing about real endings is that they don't require extended attention. They just are. In September, 6 weeks after the baby shower, Sophia and I were at my apartment on a Sunday evening when she looked up from the couch where she was reading and said with no preamble, "I want to move in together." I put down what I was reading. She was looking at me with the direct, open expression she wore when she had already made a decision and was reporting it rather than proposing it. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay. Yeah," I said. "Okay, yes, I've been thinking the same thing for 2 months." "Why didn't you say anything?" she said. "Because you're better at knowing when you're ready than I am at guessing when you are," I said. "I was waiting for you." She stared at me for a moment. "You were waiting for me." Yes, I said. For 2 months. Yes. She set her book down. Daniel, you cannot keep doing that. Doing what? Being... She gestured at me with the same vague gesture she'd used months earlier. All of this. Whatever this is. You cannot keep being exactly right all the time. It is extremely difficult to argue with. I don't want you to argue with me, I said. I want you to move in. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, Your apartment or mine? Yours has more light, I said. Mine has a better kitchen. We could look for a new one, she said. We could look for a new one, I agreed. She picked her book back up. I'll call a realtor this week. Okay, I said. And we went back to reading on opposite ends of the couch with our feet overlapping in the middle, the way they had apparently started doing without either of us deciding it, the way all the best things happened between us, without a plan, without a framework. Just two people arriving at the same place because they kept choosing the same direction. I want to tell you the end of this story cleanly, the way endings are supposed to go. But that is, that there isn't a single moment where it concluded where I can point and say, there, that's where it became what it was always going to be. Real things don't end. They accumulate. So let me tell you instead what I know now from the inside of something that started with a fake dinner and a question I never expected. I know that Sophia Bennett is the most honestly herself person I have ever been close to. She is difficult in the ways that matter. She pushes back. She holds the line. She does not soften things that should not be softened. She is also the most generous person I have ever known, in the way that generosity actually counts, not in grand gestures, but in consistent, daily attention. She remembers what you said 3 months ago, and she returns to it when it matters. She asks questions because she wants the answer. She says the hard thing because she respects you enough not to let it fester. She calls her father every Sunday. She takes her black coffee without compromise. She held a cardboard sign from an airport arrivals gate in her bag for 4 months before it ended up framed on the wall of the apartment we found together, which she claims is ironic, and I know is not ironic at all. I know that what I felt on a Friday evening in October, watching her sit down in the empty chair beside my desk, with her arms crossed, and her composure slightly cracked, and desperation in her eyes, that feeling was not performance. It was not projection. It was the recognition of someone who matters being in front of you and being honest about needing something and the decision to be honest back. I know that love is not the dramatic moment. It's not the confession in the car, or the phone call in February, or the airport sign. Those are the markers, the places where you can point later and say, that's where it crystallized. But the actual thing is underneath all of that. The actual thing is 3 years of learning someone without permission. It's a Tuesday evening text about nothing. It's saying I'm scared out loud and being met with I know and having that be enough. Here is what I want you to take from this, if you take anything at all. Sophia asked me one night, months later, long after everything had settled into something we had stopped questioning, she asked me, what would have happened if I hadn't asked you that night? I thought about it honestly. I don't know, I said. Maybe nothing. Maybe I would have kept it professional indefinitely. You would have, she said. You were extremely committed to being professional. I was. I agreed. I'm glad I grabbed your tie, she said. I'm glad you grabbed my tie, I said. You were so startled, she said, smiling at the memory. You grabbed my tie, I said. In the middle of the office. Of course I was startled. It worked though, she said. It worked, I said. Everything that came after it worked. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Daniel. Yeah. Thank you. For that night. For saying yes. Sophia, I said. I was always going to say yes. She looked at me. You didn't know that. I know it now, I said. In retrospect, I was always going to say yes. Because some things you don't choose so much as recognize. And I recognized you a long time before either of us had the language to say it. She held my gaze for a long moment. The way she did when something landed exactly right, and she was letting it settle before she responded. Then she said simply, me too. And that was the whole of it. That was the answer that had started with a grabbed tie and a whispered question, and a fake dinner that was the most real thing I had ever sat through. That was everything we'd built across 8 months of honesty and 6 months of distance, and all the small daily choices that two people make when they decide that something is worth building carefully. She asked me to be hers for one night. I told her I wanted to be someone who chose her every single day, and that was the most honest thing I have ever said, in the most impractical possible moment, to the most remarkable person I have ever known. Some stories don't end. They just become the life you're living. And this one is mine.